is to put this to work, share information, and provoke some thought and knowledge. So this is another episode from my creative writing group. I only popped in for a few minutes because I had a huge cultural event to attend, but I want to share that as well as the remnants from our event about 2 weeks ago. So here we go. Let's turn this down, but it shows that the music's all about all our connections. Caribbean, African, European. I even discovered that there's a curry after my family name. It's called Curry Chatang, which is the derivation of my family name, which is French for chestnut. But there's still plenty of African left in. So, anyway, let's dig into this story creative writing and some culture. So, we're showing some cool liquid, some ice, some lemons. So, you can just imagine your own favorite beverage. Be ready to set and go. And we're following in the steps of Rosa Parks, who said, you must never be fearful about what you're doing when it is the right thing to do. And this is what I feel is the right thing to do, is share my research, get your mind going and thinking about some things and trying to make some connections, because it's surprising what you can discover. So anyway, I popped in. They gave us a few prompts. They said, all right, these people are neighbors. One person, and then the second person, you have to throw in a vehicle and go. So in 5 minutes, this is what I come up with. You see the people and all their connections. So when you encounter one, it's not just one. There's a whole lot of folks behind you. So sometimes people forget, but there's a whole lot of something behind. So anyway, we had the gears going. We had the thoughts flowing. And basically, this is the story. We have two coworkers rushing in midnight right before Christmas. But first, co-worker one rushes in. They're at Walmart, Toys R Us, whatever. Any parent can remember, if you do, those experiences when you're at the last minute trying to find that last toy to help Santa. And this is an image of one of the hot toys. I don't recall the name, but it's the moving gears, and it's the most important thing on your child's list that you've heard about every single day up to Christmas. So you get into the store. You know the shelves are usually bare. You find that one whirling toy. You grab it. You're happy, you're exhausted, and half crazy too. You make it to the counter, you pay for it, then you stumble out, and who rushes in but the neighbor, the guy next door who rushes in looking for the same thing. He goes to the shelf is empty, the cashiers are closing up, there's no more. So it can be either the gear for the boys or for the little girls. Here's the Hatchimanno Pixie Crystal Flyers. I don't know how many of these little things I've bought, but I'm sure parents, you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, this story, I told the writing group, I said, okay, you help me finish it. We have several possibilities, and I'm going to show you visually that basically nobody wins if you don't do the right thing. That's why I put Rosa Parks at the beginning. So here's one possible scenario. You rush in. Number two parent confronts number one parent in the parking lot. And this lady's not part of the story, but these guys are. Just think, you're in the parking lot. All right. Okay. So you just imagine. That's one scenario. I hope that's not the end of this story, but is a possibility, especially how parents get crazy at Christmas time. We'll play a little more. He said, that's my toy. The other one said, no, that's my toy. I paid for it. The other one said, I had it on layaway. Okay. Okay. What? Check this out, right? All right. Okay, now you have to get a grip. Remember, we're supposed to be grown folks. Sometimes it doesn't work that way, especially at Christmas time. So that's scenario number one. It can be all out mess because when you deal with one, it's not just one, it's a whole lot of mess behind you. Here's scenario number two. I discovered this, and as I mentioned in the other scenario, I've been doing a lot of more streaming. So I want to share some discoveries here from this Disney, Raya and the Last Dragon, which is a good story. It's about conflict where these two, the protagonist and the antagonist, they're both young warriors and they're basically trying to save themselves from destruction, where half of the race has already been destroyed. She's running, and they find themselves fighting over a bright, shiny object. She takes a look at it. I like this because there's some imagery, there's a metaphor, and the guy in the mask. You'll see where that connects. And at the end, after the entire universe has been destroyed, the last crystal they're fighting over, but they break it apart. So this is a good movie. I want to give credit to Disney Plus helping me. This is scenario number two, where these two are fighting over this last bit of salvation and they end up both being destroyed. Now, the last scenario goes back to the story of Hamilton, where we see thinking about our history and our education with the gaps. This is a picture of the founding fathers that I recall seeing for many years with them all in the room together, forming the Constitution, trying to get people to sign. And if you see, it's all a room full of the same so-called type of people, the privileged landowners, nobody else, including Alexander Hamilton. So he fits into this picture. We see George Washington and a few others that are part of this scenario. But I mentioned before, the answer's not clear. I raised the hypothesis. Alexander Hamilton was a Creole. The opposite would be Alexander Hamilton was not a Creole. I found a bit of research. I added that to the last scenario, but I want you to look closely at these pictures of so-called Creoles. These ladies on the right with their headdress, this woman with very pale skin, very pale complexion, and the woman opposite her has a slight bronze. Both of these are from West Indies, the Caribbean, and termed so-called Creoles. The ones on the left are, I believe, from Louisiana. And I recall many visits to New Orleans. We had neighbors living next to my aunt in New Orleans that I thought were white, but my mother quickly informed me, no, they're black. So that's a hypothesis. I'm not sure how you can test it, but it's an interesting consideration. Here's another picture of Creoles that oftentimes people would have never known, and they managed to make it through somehow by not disclosing that information. So back to the bank, founded by Alexander Hamilton, still going strong after 230 years. And there was a statement in the lyrics of the play, I want to found something that lasts. Well, he did that. In this case, 230 years of looking forward, weathering times of change, crisis, calm. The spirit of discovery kept the bank staying ahead of the curve, delivering maximum success. So this is one picture of Alexander Hamilton. I know pictures can be colorized and tinted and changed, but this is another official picture. But I want you to look at the so-called picture of Alexander Hamilton and the Creole family, and look at that Creole baby who's about the same, blends right in with the pale, very pale, white baby clothes. So anyway, back to Alexander Hamilton. This is from their current website, Not only was Alexander Hamilton the country's first Secretary of the Treasury, he also helped establish the U.S. Mint, and his face is still on the $10 bill. His list of titles include military commander, economist, congressman, banker, lawyer, and political philosopher. After resigning from Congress, he returned to New York to continue his legal work, and this is where you see the scene in the play that I continue to look and read and review some of the lyrics, the songs, as well as the actual play, which I'll show you next. He continued his legal work, doing legal work. Aaron Burr was his neighbor. And so these two could also be in this scenario as rivals, competitors. And you see what happened. Alexander Hamilton was shot in a duel with his competitor, Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr escaped and hid out in Alabama for years. I believe was considered or reviewed for treason, but he did get away with those charges and was never charged for the murder. So in 1784, Alexander Hamilton founded the Bank of New York, and it's still here. So I want to show you this clip now that I've set you up with all the historical relevancy. These are two of the characters in Hamilton. So as I said before, these images might come as a surprise if you are used to the historical representations of Hamilton. These are the two main characters. Lynn, the creator, I have had an uncle that looked like this. He never wore his hair long, but if he did, it would have looked just like that. And the man next to him is playing Aaron Burr, the man who eventually murdered Alexander Hamilton. So it's very interesting. They call it an unforgettable cinematic performance. There's live theater, but there's a lot of history, and it's important to consider the amount of work it took to bring it all together. So I'll quickly flash a few scenes that might be of interest or relevant for those who haven't seen it. As I said, it's coming back soon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. One of the scenes that was very interesting was sung by Alexander Hamilton's wife. Isn't it enough just to have a loving relationship, a family life? And she becomes a widow in the process. But I want to give them credit for the work. That's Thomas Jefferson with his afro. These are the Schuyler sisters, and the beautiful collection and diversity in this play is amazing. If some of us recall the historical representations of our history. So thank God for people on a budget who can't afford a $10,000 ticket. This is a blessing. Again, this is Aaron Burr singing about Alexander Hamilton. This is Hamilton. So I think after COVID, your memories are evoked and you start to think about those things that are embedded. And this is one, when I see this, I see some uncles and some cousins, including one of my favorite of the seven, Uncle Willie, when I see these two characters. So there was an interesting song that I wanted to refer to, but this connects to the books I wrote while doing my PhD work research. The one on the left is called Principles of Human Development, or Gumbo, because we're all mixed up with all sorts of background images and pictures in this play, as well as the images from Netflix. Tell it all about how we're all a combination of so many things and experiences, and it's something that we cannot forget. It's very important to consider. So we'll move ahead. The book on the right was also inspired while doing my research to complete the last of the required books. I had six. All six were written by me, 1 to 200 pages that I just discovered. The content is not accessible, but I am working on that. I'm glad I wrote and published each and every iteration of these. They were required. I met the university requirements for my PhD up to this stage, and I'm ready to earn my degree. This book on the right is about succession and legacy, and that story of Hamilton connects directly about how do you plan for your future. Many businesses only last, small businesses only last one generation, but obviously in Alexander Hamilton's case, he did enough and he created something that's lasted 230 years. So we had a cultural celebration. And I want to share that because my writing group, I had to quickly leave after about 5 or 10 minutes of sharing my quick story. And this is what I was heading to, a cultural celebration of the Festival of Mass that honors our ancestors, our history. I've mentioned French, but the African ancestry blends, and that's what our celebration consisted of. Our task was to create a mask similar to what's done by the Dogon people in Mali. And this really struck a chord. One of my friends from college actually went to Ouagadougou in Mali and served in Peace Corps. She was a banker and a treasury financial manager, and I believe fell off the grid, and I suspect she might still be in Mali. So I created these masks. I added the artwork and the jewelry, as well as these cuffs. Now, some of you may or may not understand what this represents, but I want to share with you the gold and the diamonds, the jewels that have been harvested and taken from the African continent are part of the overall takings that need to be corrected, the ownerships of these mines. I think that would be something, a very important achievement. Not only was apartheid changed and dismantled, I think ownership of the mining and the jewels and resources are important. That's what these cuffs represent, synthetic representations of the jewels and the resources in Africa, taken from Africa, and that are still in on the continent. So I took a few pictures as I was going about creating this mask. It was an interesting exercise because I started out with a piece of brown paper, did my sketching after some careful tutoring from LA Commons, and then sketched, painted, add some glitter and some jewels. And this was another representation as we prepared for the ceremony. These are my cuffs on both arms. If you saw, again, I added some feathers, and you'll understand in a minute why, but it was part of the effort of creation where I drew the imagery and was inspired to continue to create this. I showed it to the group. This is the mask as I was forming it. Then I cut it out with the jewelry and the painting and the sequence to show a representation. I also drew and created this house to show the sunshine, the glittering sky, as well as some night stars glittering in during the day, and the ocean. But again, I want to show the cuffs. I added feathers to add to the story. And again, after I cut out the mask, this is an image of what it looked like with the gold background. This is the image with the white background, and this is me with my mask ready for the ceremony. So you might say, where'd you get that idea? I've seen these African tribal coils in travels in Africa. These are for sale. So you can see on the left, the wiring. I used gold representation. These are Maasai cuffs. And on the right, a choker. So again, it's important to understand these ceremonial representations, honoring our background, honoring our ancestors, and looking for the future. So the mom you see has her gold cuffs, and the twins are next to her, all in traditional dress, using the textiles that we discussed. I had a visiting lecture conversation with George Washington University textile mill about how materials and concepts can be appropriated and stolen. So not only has that been stolen, many other things. So we have to try to reclaim this. This is another 14 karat yellow gold wide cuff. And this is what the ceremony is based on, honoring the ancestors, using the cultural representation of the Dogon people, as I mentioned. They're in Mali in a very dry area, and they've mentioned in the past that they've managed to avoid um, contact by staying in the hills and the highlands. You can see from this video that I'm about to show what this ceremony is based on. There was shame for so many years, but now, thanks to our education and our research, we can recreate a lot of these ceremonies that are important, honoring our ancestors. We called out their names, and I want to show this briefly again. And I see this and think about my friend Bianca. I hope she's doing well wherever she's landed. But you can see the headdress they have on. That's how I designed my mask. And you see the stilt walkers. Even the Malians said in another part of the YouTube, if there's conflict, their tradition says they just say stop, just stop it. And sometimes that's all it takes. But that's what the ceremony is based on that we had a few weeks ago. So when I showed my writing group, I didn't have a chance to explain. That's why I added the feathers. You see that on the wrist. So we had music, we had dancing, and the idea is to mask yourself and honor those who went before us that made it possible for us to be here today. And call out their names. Right, honoring the dead, honoring our ancestors, the people that made it possible for us to be here today. And they say this one in particular only happens every 60 years. So I'm glad I participated. This was my first time. And I don't know if in 60 years I'm optimistic. I'm ready to participate again whenever we have another one of these ceremonies. So that's what the ceremony is based on. Again, we create our mask. We had our ceremony. This is me with my mask. And I want to be thankful and show my gratitude to the LA Commons because the whole thing was recorded professionally. They did manage to capture me.
I see some sparkles in there. Oh, you got the eyes through there. Oh, that's fantastic.
You had a few feathers.
Oh, and the stone in the center.
There you go. Ooh, there's a few more of the masks.
Look at the trees. Honey, fantastic work. Oh, I love the tassels at the bottom.
The announcer.
That is beautiful.
The moderator. Beautiful. The whole program was just exceptional. And their first class operation. This is from South Africa.
Performing with his group. Or year before last.
Funded by
performing with his group
City of LA, the World Stage.
Boy, did we have a blast. So
right.
Malik, if you're with us, I got some questions for you, man.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to uplift about the beautiful people, the beautiful culture, and the beautiful country of Senegal both in the past
Right.
and in this moment. So,
So
Malik,
South
if you would do
Africa's
that for us,
asking
we would really
synagogue
appreciate it.
questions.
Hello, brother.
And I'm thanking
Welcome,
Sister Cities
everybody.
International, Dakar,
Everybody's enjoying
City of
this ancestral
Pasadena.
time right now.
This is an
Yes.
addendum to our
Thank you
celebration.
very much for having me and having the culture wherever we go.
Yes.
I would like to uplift the indigenous culture of Senegal and let go the colonial ideology of the past
Yes.
this moment in time.
Honor the present and our accomplishments.
And that's my take on your question.
All right. We
Okay.
got to let go of our colonial past.
Thank
all
you.
that.
Now we had this, these two are the creators. This was part of the ceremony honoring the ancestors.
Others with the spirit.
And we want to show, we had some dancing by Lulu Washington Dance Group. Very important, very relevant, right on time. Thank you, Lulu. Gotta hang in there. Thank you.
Everybody and sing.
Thank you. And this was another one. So now you understand. I had to go.
Everybody and sing.
Thank you.
Tell us and heaven ring. Ring with the harmony.
Thank you.
Split.
And a
of
little
stillness
music.
from
I'm spending a few extra minutes because this is my answer to one agency, like one of the physicians at UCSF said he applied to NIH 11 times for grant funding for his research on asthma in Black and Puerto Rican children. Well, this is one example where I applied for funding for my work in the community, writing my books and additional artwork, and the response was no, there's no art here. So this is your answer. Take that.
Remember who we are and what
Thank you.
inspires us? And
Exactly.
then together, we can move forward into the future.
That's right.
Here's
Here's the credits. God bless you all for doing what you do and letting me enjoy it and participate. And this is for my Second Wind nonprofit for education and community, my 501c3. And there's the twins. There's a legend that they never die. They always come and morph into something else. So it could be. Thank you, LA Comments, Sister Cities International, South Africa, Dakar. And that's it for Second Wind. Any questions, feedback, send me an email or connect on LinkedIn. Just to remind you, yes, there's art and creation here. So we'll wrap this one up too. I also want to show a little bit of the houses, since I've spoken about housing, differences in housing that blend the culture, the historical background. You see the domes, you see the pointed
ropes. Oh, that's
housing.
Why these trees. I was wondering about why this is like ropes. Oh, that's why these trees.
And it's built into the hills in Mali. And don't forget the goat.
Very high, small houses.
Okay, I'll wrap this up for now, but I want to show the housing when we're talking about compare contrast and just
We
some
explored
data.
the vacated Dogon Cliff villages below.
Some data to consider, because in my most recent book, Engineering Management of Globally Distributed Systems, Goods and Services, there's a lot of trade, there's a lot of exchanges, but one consideration is that this is one of the poorest of the poorest countries
Glyphs
in
are
the
on the
world.
walls.
And I cite the data and the statistics in my book. I'm very thankful for the technology that I have, but I want to also highlight the economic disparities that are reflected in the lack, the very few people that have had access to the COVID vaccine. Oftentimes it's due to isolation. But I want to pull up some of the data that I have in my book. I shortcut call it EMG, referring to the unaffordability of medicine for HIV treatment. And I basically ranked some of the countries that are the poorest of the poor, that cannot even afford medication to treat HIV/AIDS. But I've since discovered, since publishing this, that many of the medications are no charge. So thank God to the nonprofits, the NGOs, etc., for helping to alleviate that strain, because my list of these countries is on page 58 of my book, EMG. The list of the poorest of the poor include Afghanistan, $594 a year. Benin, $792 a year. Annual per capita income. The Gambia, $471 a year. Malawi, $372 a year. So when we see people living, this will help you see what you're actually looking at. But there's still the culture.
It's the prayer coming out of the mud moss.
There's still life and living. Life goes on. My family was not rich, so I can understand. You do the best you can with what you have.
They quickly set up a rooftop bed
and plan for the
complete with a
future.
white.
So we'll wrap this up for now. Thank you for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed this. Send me an email or just subscribe. You have a good evening. Thank you very much. And we'll wrap it up with a little bit more of this music so my group will understand. Takes a village, to say the least. So those who can see, there's plenty of art and culture there.